Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels basketball recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're checking us out on our growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI Publisher Andrew Jones. Joining me is our Director of Basketball Recruiting, longtime college AAU and high school coach, and a good storyteller, Mr. David Sisk. And David, we've having some fun before we start this podcast, but we're going to have a lot of fun with this podcast. We're going to hit on 4 kids in the class of 22 that are uncommitted. They are UNC targets, 3 of whom in particular, and we'll kind of touch on one guy at the end. We're going to start it out with Tyler Nichols, someone that you saw in person and talked to here about a month ago. That's the AAU circuit that you were at in Georgia and Alabama. You saw a lot of guys. You did talk to Tyler Nichols, 6'7", small forward from Elton, Virginia, the number 96 overall prospect in the country. Number 27 is position. I don't know if that's going to change when the next rankings come out, David, but perhaps they will. He did recently announce a top 5 of Carolina, Butler, Iowa, LSU, and the Virginia Tech Hokies. So, David, Tyler Nichols, what is the latest with him? What are your thoughts on him right now?
And obviously we've already talked about seeing him at AAU events at the Adidas Nationals in Birmingham. He's narrowed down those 5 schools. The 5 schools aren't surprising. I'm just going through my notes here I've got on the phone. He's already set up official visits for each one. North Carolina is September 10th through September 12th. So he's setting up each one. From what I see now, and I think I can say this, just a summary of the 22 class, there's not a ton of pressure right now on Hubert Davis because he's already gone out and he's got 3 commits already, had a big summer. And if he gets guys good, if he doesn't, he's always got the transfer portal to kind of fall back on. And I don't know that that's a fallback anymore. I think they're pretty well equal. And he's also got a pretty full roster. So he's not in a situation where he has just, the cupboard's been bare and he's had to replenish. So you're going to have players like Tyler Nichols taking these visits, and it's just, North Carolina basically putting their best foot forward on all these official visits and showing each player how bad they want them, and then you kind of let it go from there. And I know we're talking about Nickel here, but I think I'm looking at it more as an in general summary. I think it's also interesting that they've already offered 5 kids. They've really been aggressive here with the 2023 class. And all these guys that they're offered in 23 are just big-time prospects, the best of the best, top 5 stars. And so I think they're going to do their best on these trips, but I think that you're seeing I'm not going to say a relaxed coaching staff, but you're seeing a coaching staff right now that I don't feel is desperate.
I agree, and that's kind of my take on it too. However, if they can land a shooter, I think they'll be happy to bring in a shooter because that speaks to what Hubert has talked about when he met with us, when he was hired, and the other interviews he's done. I don't think he can have too many shooters. So if they're going to get a 4th kid in this class, and right now, if you look at what they have, they got 3 kids that are committed right now, and they have a senior and Nikki Black. It's pretty clear that Caleb Lowe's probably going. That's sort of what they're telling kids on the trail. Odds are pretty good Armando Bacot goes. So if those 3 go, they've got their 3 kids. They may lose somebody else. Plus, they only have 12 scholarships right now. The walk-on will get a 13th scholarship this coming season. So theoretically, if Bacot and Love leave, they got 4 spots. You think that if he's like, okay, let's go ahead and take another shooter, Tyler Nichols is a perfect kind of 4th guy to get that other shooter on the roster for next year?
Yeah, and, they're also looking, it appears to me, they just want a bigger wing. We've had people on in the Four Corners forum ask, about that position, but, they've already brought in, a point guard, Seth Trimble. They basically got a 4 in Jalen Washington and a 5, in the center there, Will Shaver. So I think they're looking at guys with size too. I don't know if you'd call them threes per se or not, but you're talking about bigger wings, in that 6'6", 6'7" range in Nickel and Whitmore. So I think, if they could land a bigger one, a bigger wing player, feel like that's something maybe that I'm not going to say a life and death priority, but a spot that they would like to replenish.
Well, you brought up Whitmore, so let's stay on the wing. Let's go to Cam Whitmore. I would say of the players left in the class of 22 that are targets at Carolina's, he generated the most buzz over the last month on our message board, so people absolutely fell in love with him. He's a 6'6" kid, 4-star from Severn, Maryland. He's currently rated number 101 in the class and number 29 in his position. I would imagine that's going to change when the next ratings come out. Some of his offers are UCLA, Villanova, Maryland, Illinois, LSU. Got a lot of. He doesn't have a ton of the highest end programs that are pursuing him, but that's kind of good for Carolina because if those guys come in at some point, Tar Heels have already kind of been on the Cam Whitmore train here for a couple of months. So, your thoughts on how Cam Whitmore fits into this? And if it comes down to, let's say Cam Whitmore and Tyler Nickel call them up at the same time and say, "Hey, we want to come," who would they take?
Well, Whitmore's not I wouldn't call Whitmore a shooter per se, just looking at numbers, particularly from a Peach Jim. He looks to me like he's really good at putting the ball on the floor, more an athletic type. And I fully expect when the next rankings come out that Whitmore will be ranked much higher than Tyler Nickel. That's just my opinion. And that's not a knock on Tyler Nickel. I think where he's at in the rankings is where he's at. But I think Whitmore is going to take a huge jump. I'm trying to remember who said this. I don't remember if it was Jamie Shaw or it was a person that I heard who maybe works at another company or doesn't even rank players, but's in the grassroots business. But I'm trying to remember, but I heard someone say that of all the players that they saw all summer, and they saw a lot of guys, that Cam Whitmore was one of the top handful that he saw in the country. So he made it sound like, Whitmore's a top 20, top 25 player. And if you look at what he did, he had a good Peach Jam. He had an excellent summer league in the Washington, D.C. Catholic League that you're familiar with. So, there's a very good body of work there. Now, like I said, I didn't see the big 3-point shooting numbers, but I did see a very athletic scoring wing that you start mixing him in with a very athletic point guard with guys like Seth Trimble, with Jalen Washington, with guys like that. And you start putting, we've talked about shooters, but I don't know that we need to overlook the athleticism that they may be able to add as well.
And it was in that summer league at the Matho when Hubert and the staff went up and saw him. And I know that wasn't the only reason they offered, but he was so good, they went ahead and extended the offer. Okay, so Nickel and Whitmore are different. They're going to have one more spot to fill if they want. They could have 2 more spots to fill if something happens. Garcia Lee goes pro or someone transfers. Can you envision a scenario where both kids want to go and Hubert brings them both?
Ask that question one more time.
Can you envision a scenario where if they have 2 spots that they can fill and Hubert decides to fill them both, and both Nickel and Whitmore want to go to Carolina, can you envision a scenario where Hubert would actually take both, or is this going to be?
No, I don't think so, and I don't think honestly they'd be able to get both. And what I mean by that, I just think when a player has options, he's going to look at playing time.
Yeah.
I don't know that a kid's you're going to say, okay, we're going to fill up our 13 roster spots and we're going to bring in 2 small forwards and you guys fight it out, and we've got some others too. That just doesn't. I don't see that. But like I said, he's not desperate. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think when you look at some of the guys in the 23s, and we know that the transfer portal is always strong, I'm kind of a guy that would say all right, the roster is already good. I think the roster is going to be good in that next year. Shoot for the moon. Bring in, let's start looking at some of the very top. So that's kind of how I look at it,
We're going to have a 2023 podcast next week. We'll dive a lot more into that. Okay, so based on what you just said, what happens if Derek Lively wants to go? He's a 5-star kid, center, 6'11", from Westtown, Pennsylvania, number 14 overall in the class, number 2 at his position. Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio State. Everybody wants him. You've seen him in person. You've been extremely positive about all kinds of things about where he is now and where he's headed as a player. So what if a guy like him wants to come in?
Absolutely.
You can't turn him away.
No way. I mean, their Rivals has him ranked number 11 or 12, and it's probably the lowest ranking that anybody has, of him. I think, everybody else is a top 10, and I know there's some that's got him up in the top 5, even as high as number 3. I don't know, and I know I've really been high on him. I don't know that I would exactly put him that high because I don't know how well he can score. And that's the issue, and it's not his fault, because if any of you guys watch Team Final in the Peach Jam, their semifinal and their finals were on ESPN, and he would have games, most of his games, he's scoring 8-9 points on like 3 shots, 4 shots. And they had just a tremendous backcourt, but those guys were all ball-centric kind of, and they were really good with it on the floor. There weren't a whole lot of post touches when they were, and their post inside game, having said that, was the best one in the country because Jalen Duren was also on it. So, but Jalen kind of stretched out, and then Lively's in the block, and there just wasn't a lot of post feeds. Now, in a championship game, he had a run where he either had like 6 points in 3 possessions or 8 points in 4, but he took over the game late in a very tight game with Bradley Beal Elite, and basically that was the difference in him winning like a 3-point game. So
is that the game? Is that the either Jamie or Rob, Jamie Shaw, Rob Cassidy, in a note that they wrote about Derek Lively recently, they said that he was in a game with Jalen Duren and DJ Wagner, the top kids in 22 and 23 classes, and Lively was the one that stood out. Is that the game you're referring to?
Yeah, that was that championship game, yes. And just his, like I said, just his athleticism at 7'1", coordination, hand and feet, and eye coordination, runs like a guard. He runs as fast baseline to baseline as any player in the country, and that sounds crazy, but he's like a 7'1" sprinter. Can jump, can just a natural shot blocker, can do it in the full court. So, yeah, enough about him as far as talent, but so where does North Carolina stand? Yeah, if you were to get him, I don't think they're like the lead. I don't know. They may be number 2, maybe number 3. The thing about him right now, we're not hearing a lot, and I've asked around. We're doing this on Monday night. On Sunday, I did a ton of texting and calling, and I'm hitting recruiting guys. I'm trying to call with sources close to him. I'm talking to grassroots guys of inside the NBA. And I'm just wore the phone out, and there's just no news on him right now. So it's quiet. I think it's probably going to pick up in the next few days, but Jalen Duren, for a guy of that magnitude, had the most unpredictable recruiting process where nobody knew what he was going to do. But he's played with Team Final Duren, so he's got some of the same people around him that have been through this, up till now.
Yeah.
Know how to go about this and really keep it quiet. And if anything is said, it's kind of a smoke screen, misdirection. We'll see more, but it's quiet on him right now.
Do you also think that a guy like Lively doesn't need to rush into anything? Someone like him wait to see how things shape up with certain programs in the spring to see maybe get a better idea what the roster might look like? Because I would imagine he's looking at stepping in somewhere and maybe being one and done type.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think too, fall visits. And he took North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky. So that was just 3 visits. So that kind of tells you, what kind of player he is. But I hear Memphis, with them picking up Duran, could try to get involved. And who knows? Maybe there's an opportunity where he tries that out. But sometimes with these kids too, and Lively's one, they've taken visits in the summer. And this one was different this year because with COVID coming back, the dead period was over. And what I mean, I said COVID coming back, the visits coming back from COVID in June. We haven't had all these June official visits before, so that was unusual. Yeah. So what happened was Derek Lively comes to North Carolina and he gets to see an empty Franklin Street, an empty campus. And he did that with all these places, and you can't get a vibe. Well, what's it like when students are there, when 30,000 kids are there and 20,000 girls are on campus, and you got a football weekend, and real life is there. And I would want to, if I was a player, and let's say I knew it was going to be North Carolina, Kentucky, Duke, I knew that, and I'd already been there, I would want to go visit in the fall and on a home weekend. If North Carolina's playing Miami, in Chapel Hill, I want to be there. If Duke's playing Virginia or Kentucky's playing Georgia, their home games, that's where I want to be. And I want to see what campus life is like. I want to be there on a lively weekend. I remember Ron Mercer, I'll never forget this. You talking about stories. And when I coached Ron, we're in Gatlinburg at an AAU tournament. And I didn't live far from Gatlinburg at all. And they had hotel rooms, the kids did, and all that. I'll never forget it. I'm sitting on the foot of the bed, got 2 beds there. I'm on one, Ron's on the other one. And we're watching the end of the Colorado-Michigan game when Cordell Stewart throws the Hail Mary. You remember that? Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about that, and he said, man, that was great. He said, I'm going to go he said, I'm going to Miami in a few weeks. They play Florida State. And I said, are you? He said, I hope it's a game like that. And I said, you thinking about Miami? Of course, me and you have already talked a little bit about Miami with him but before we came on. But I said, are you going to Miami? He said, no. He said, I love football, and I want to see Miami and Florida State. And that we're talking 1993 when it was really hot when those two teams played. 94, right around.
I think that may have been another wide right game.
Yeah, and he said, I want to see Miami, Florida State. So, that's it. If I was those kids, I would want to be there on a home game weekend, and I would want to pick one of the best games. I wouldn't want to see North Carolina and Gardner-Webb or somebody. I wouldn't want to see a good game,
And Miami does visit Carolina in mid-October, and that will be big time. Could be a big time game for both teams if they both are as expected. I would imagine it's going to be a massive football recruiting weekend, but I think that will be really interesting to see what basketball recruits are in for that weekend. And where we sit in the press box when there are fans, previously the basketball team would always enter from like the bottom of the blue zone. They'd walk across and they'd come in and they'd sit kind of in the student section, sort of directly below the press box on the Carolina side. And there have been recruits with them in the past, and our photographers have gotten photos with those recruits. And, when the football team is good, they're probably having a little bit better time because there's a better buzz in the stadium. So I would imagine, if they could get as many kids in as possible, because that'll probably be a night game, with Miami full, that'd be a great opportunity for Carolina. Yeah,
and don't forget too, and this is not far away. The season, I'm not going to say it's upon us, but it's not long. Kids are getting back on campus. You're covering football practice. Yeah. Late night with Hubert. I don't know what they're going to call it, But
there's been nothing announced yet, by the way. There's been nothing announced yet, by the way. But I bet if they have one, like they did previously with Late Night with Roy, it'll be packed. I mean, I've seen them turn people away at those things before, which I don't understand. But Rupert's will be packed, and they'll have a lot of kids there.
Well, my point is the season starts earlier and earlier, so you're talking October, and I'm sure they probably do that on a home football game weekend. And I would suspect that he's going to try to get every recruit in there for that he can get from 2020 through to 2025. He's going to get every high school kid that's really good in there that he could see. That would, I mean, I'm sure he's a smart guy, and I'm sure that's what they're going to be looking at, using that as a recruiting bonanza.
Yeah, the end of September, first part of October, they're at Georgia Tech in the last weekend of September, but they're home against Duke in football the first weekend of September. The night before would be a pretty good time to bring a lot of those kids as well. Deontay Green is a kid we haven't talked about for a while. Jacob, I think it was, or Jacob spoke with him, I believe it was, at an event in Winston-Salem back in May. Then he was supposed to visit Carolina in June, pushed it back to August. There's been lots of kind of, I would say, different stuff being thrown around about him, not very consistent narratives, if you will. So what is going on with Deontay Green? And some people think that the ship has left for Carolina. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, that's one reason I wanted to bring his name up. And, you asked me, well, who should we talk about, which players in 2022? And I said, maybe Deontay Green. And one reason I said maybe, he's an in-state kid. So I feel like him being in-state, probably somebody there that we would need to address. And I spoke with another writer at Rivals from that covers another basketball program last week, and then spoke again with him Sunday night, and asked him, what are you hearing even with his program? And he hears that there's a heavy, seems like North Carolina State lean.
Yeah. Yeah, that's of all the stuff that we've kind of been hearing through the grapevine, if you will. State's been the most consistent thing. And I also would think that he's a kid that wouldn't wait, that I would imagine that, opportunities at certain places may not be there forever. So he might want to go ahead and grab one of those spots at a program like a State pretty soon. Is that kind of your read on this as well?
Yeah. And, it's who is recruiting him the heaviest. I don't know right now how hard North Carolina is actually pitching for him at this point. But I do know evidently that North Carolina State's probably after him. Seems like it, and made that pitch to him, and maybe more than anybody else. I think Wake Forest is in there pretty heavily too, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like those two are names that I'm hearing, and maybe North Carolina State in particular has really made a strong move.
Yeah, both have prioritized him some. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to predict anything with the first three that we talked about, Nickel, Lively, and Whitmore. But if one of the three were to commit to Carolina, would it surprise you? And if you had to pick one, you don't have to ask us if you don't want to, because people will misread it. You have to hear the words. I'm telling you to choose somebody. You're not predicting this. Would you pick one of the out of these three? Could you actually say, okay, I think that guy would be most likely?
I would say Cam Whitmore probably.
And why is that?
I know when I talked to him when he originally got that offer, he said it is a national championship offer. Those were his words. I also know that, and I do read into this, that if I see a player talking to other local beat writers or other programs, and they're not talking to me, then I feel like the program that they're talking to, there's more. And that's been the case. I know there's been kids and I'll give you an example, kind of let everybody know where I'm coming from on this, and I think you would agree. You've been through this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So let's say Andrew Jones is being recruited by North Carolina. So Andrew Jones has got North Carolina, Virginia, and Clemson. Those are his three, okay? And through the process, before North Carolina offers and as North Carolina offers and they get to know each other, you and I are talking a lot. I text you, you answer back. I call, you answer the phone. And then as the recruitment gets into the latter stages, I see you talking to the Clemson guys or the Virginia Tech guys at Rivals or whichever medium, but you're not talking to me anymore. That kind of lets me know you don't want to talk about North Carolina.
Yeah.
Now, if we've never had that relationship, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Another option is this. I see, and we talk about it all the time. You say, is it frustrating? And we've had people talk on the boards. Man, I couldn't imagine trying to run these kids down. That would be frustrating, going on their schedule. And I've told you this, sometimes the most frustrating thing to me, and this is just real life, and it's the way it works, really it gets to a point where the only ones they'll talk to are the national guys. And they don't want to talk. So I understand that. That's the frustrating part, but it's frustrating. But so if you get to where you're talking to Jamie Shaw, but you're not talking to me, or you're not talking to a guy from Clemson or Virginia Tech, I don't put much into that. I'm just like, hey, he's kind of big time in it here, like a lot of kids want to do. They want as much pub as they can get, so they want to go national. I understand that totally. But I look at Cam Whitmore as and Justin Taylor, my goodness. Our kid, Tyler Nickel, good gracious. They're both from Virginia. I take that, I'm sorry. Tyler Nickel he's been good to talk. It's not been the easiest guy, but we've spoken several times and he's been good. But Cam Whitmore just seems to me like a kid that it's pretty easy to get in touch with. He's responsive, and I just know how giddy he was with that North Carolina offer. So I expect to visit, and we'll see after these visits, and who knows, you never know how they'll go, but he just seems to me kind of right now, if I had to pick one, he just kind of checks all the boxes around it.
His quote that you referenced about they win championships, and he kind of, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, he ended that statement by saying, isn't that what it's all about? Yeah. I mean, that's a guy who wants to play, I think, ideally wants to play for a blue blood. And how many blue bloods have offered him so far? True blue bloods. I'm talking like fabled sick UK, Kansas, Carolina, Duke type schools. Carolina's been in there. They've been in there now for a while. And they've been in there through the summer circuit, and now they're heading into the fall circuit here, and they've been there all along. And the whole staff saw him when he played at the Matha in that summer league back there in June. So there's a lot there. And I get where you're coming from on that. We're not projecting that that's going to happen. Right. Out of this crew, that would be my pick as well.
And, I have to be careful sometimes because, I try to be as say what's on my mind as much as possible. We enjoy the people that listen to this. We thank you for being a part. Our numbers are great. I go back on YouTube and look, and we're having a lot of people watch, and our subscribers, we're always grateful to them. So I want to be as transparent. I don't want to have secrets with you guys. I want to let you know what's on my mind. But I don't want to talk too loosely or say too much. And sometimes that happens, but I want you to understand the context that I say all this in. We're just throwing scenarios. They've got that recruitment with Nickel, and this has nothing to do with Nickel or any of those other guys. It's Isaac Trout. I'll give you an example. I really enjoyed watching Isaac Trout, but I was going to do, and I've not even told you that. I may have. I don't think so. I was going to call him and do a story. I was going to try to do a story on as many of these guys as I could straight out AAU, since I didn't get to talk to them in July quite as much. And, we had a great conversation. This went on for 6 or 7 minutes. And I said, all right, who's recruiting you the hardest? Well, he reels off like 6 names, and North Carolina is not one of them. And I said, well, what about North Carolina? And he said, well, I heard they came to one game. I've not really been hearing from them much lately, every now and then. And if you asked me any of the players that I saw in person that I was impressed with the most, I would have told you Isaac Trout. I was like, man, I liked him. But, that kind of shows you there how it goes. So who's to say what I see, and me, even with me being there, they may be totally different on how they feel than what I feel. And let me add one more thing to this. Having said that, I really think, who knows, when these guys visit, they may put more of a priority on one player than they do another. And what I'm saying, they may cool off on one and not recruit him quite as hard. And trust me, that player will get that vibe and they will know. And then one that they go all in on, that player's going to know as well. So there's a lot of things will go on that we don't know about as far as prioritizing. And who knows, that guy may be these other ones that we talked about. They may be infatuated with Tyler Nickel, and that may be the guy that they're after. So I don't want anybody to read what I'm saying here and say, well, this is the guy that they want. I'm answering the question you asked, but you just kind of have some ideas and base it. So, that's all it is.
Yeah, that's why I had to preface it for like 27 minutes before asking you, because we don't want to mislead. But I do think it's good to maybe ask what the vibe is, especially out of that little group, and kind of see where you think things are a little bit right now. And of course, anybody who pays attention to recruiting, and people who are going to watch this video or listen to us, or people who pay attention to recruiting, they know this stuff can change on a dime, and it can change very, very quickly. So this is for conversation. It's also to kind of let people know what's going on. So we do not want to mislead. And you know what, David? I'm glad you said that, because that was sort of the vibe I was having. So whenever you say something that I'm thinking, it makes me think, okay, I'm reading this the right way too, because I got, you're David Sisk. I'm just
if you and I are in agreement, that means we got this thing totally screwed up.
Maybe that's the other way of looking at it. I'm sitting here patting myself on the back thinking, I'm kind of David's thinking the same thing I am. You're probably thinking, oh God, no, I got to change my take now.
No.
All right.
But you being, like I said, it's interesting. People have questions all the time about not necessarily even players, but about the whole recruiting cycle, your experiences from it. And, we get them all the time. What's it like to try to get in touch with these kids and deal with them? And I get people ask me all the time, maybe one day you could get in like a group chat and just tell stories behind the scenes that you can't come up with, recruiting stories that you can't go public with. So, it's I do. By the way,
I tell stories
stuff,
when I meet people. If I feel them out, feel pretty comfortable, I tell them some stuff sometimes, and I'm sure you do as well. So maybe we'll have to do a THI meet and greet at some point. We've done one in the past where we fly you in from Tennessee, big dog style, and you can tell some of the stories you tell me all the time, which are off the charts amazing. And by the way,
you get home and you that night you put on YouTube and you see you're in my face on it, and it's already had 180,000 hits, and you're like, oh
yeah, right, yeah. And by the way, if you want to ask David questions on a regular basis, just go to THIillustrated.com. It's just $8.33 a month. Other than these podcasts that we do, we don't do many with him. Everything he does otherwise is behind the paywall. And for a good reason, as you hear this. And he'll answer questions. Go on the board, ask him a question. David's going to be there. Dina does it. I do it. So going over there is certainly worth it. It's like the price of a drive-through meal at a fast food joint, and you got everything for a whole month. So go over there and check us out and be a part. Right now is a great time to do it because football's going crazy. Basketball stuff's getting ready out here pretty soon, and recruiting is off the charts for both programs at Carolina. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. Thanks a bunch for stopping by.